What's Keeping It Real with Tania and Nette. I'm Nette and this is Tania.
I'm Tania. Hi, welcome.
Thank you for listening again. Today we're actually going to do a topic which is not the way we normally do it. We've had a lot of listeners and people who have come and seen Tania doing her mediumship, and they're asking, what should we expect? What do we bring? Why would we come to be? What do we get out of it? So today we're going to sort of chat a bit more about that. And we're also interested, as you know, we don't know each other very well, and we haven't got into a lot of depth ourselves with this. We know the basics of each other. So it'll be interesting for us to sort of ask each other questions on your behalf of what we should expect. So Tania, so you've been getting some great readings from people through our podcast, and just in general, you're already doing that. So can you give us sort of a rundown of why people are coming to see you?
Well, there's a variety of different reasons. So what I do, and I think I've explained it before, is I'm a medium, which is like connecting to past loved ones, ascended masters, spirit guides, anybody in spirit. And I'm also a medical medium. So basically that means that spirit's giving me information about medical things that are happening for people. And interestingly, right at the beginning, as we're sitting down, you're like, oh, I did something to my wrist. And I'm like, yeah, I think that you have just a tiny, I almost want to say hairline fracture on your wrist. I feel like it was smashed. Like, was it smacked with something?
Smashed head on, like crushed almost between something. So for those who are watching the podcast rather than listening to, the top of my hand's swollen there. And
you mean listening as opposed to watching?
Watch it, yeah, the other way around. You know, there's a swelling there, and I was deciding whether I should get an x-ray or not, but I think I will after this now that I've spoken to
I think
Tania.
You should. Just because it's kind of a tiny, I want to say hairline, like it's small, but I do think that you're going to need to wrap it. It's going to need to be wrapped in some way. So that's kind of an example of what medical mediumship looks like. So people will come, and often it's people that have cancer or things like that. And I'll get back to that. But the other thing that I do is sort of intuitive readings. So what's happening for you right now? What are your blocks? What are the things that you're struggling with? And sort of moving forward, what that looks like to you. And interesting, lately, Spirit has been encouraging me to pull cards prior to readings. And you and I talked about this. I don't usually pull cards, but I've actually super enjoyed it. My favorite deck is John Holland, the Psychic Tarot. And it's an oracle deck, and I just love it. It's just got simple pictures and simple words, and it's wonderful. Anyway,
so how do you use those with your reading? You start with the tarot at the start, or you start or you just let it flow?
So what I've been doing is, before the person even comes online, because I do all of my readings over Zoom, is I'll pull cards, and Spirit will tell me how many, 6, 4, 3, 2, whatever. And so I pull them and I take a look, and I'll start to get a bit of an idea about what the reading's about. Sometimes I don't. Most of the time I don't prep at all for readings, but they've been asking me to. So I'm like, okay, fine, I can do that. So I just lay out the cards, and sometimes I say, okay, so I started with some cards, and this is the general understanding of what I'm, getting. But the first thing that I typically ask people is like, what are you looking for? Because some people come and they just want to connect with past loved ones, or they're struggling with something, say a pattern that they just keep repeating. And they're like, okay, like what's expected of me? Like, what am I supposed to be learning here? Because I'm clearly not getting it. So, we'll kind of work through that, or it'll be often medical things. And like I was saying earlier, somebody that has cancer or something, they'll be in remission, and they're like, is it coming back? Or, how am I doing? Or I've had this, sort of ailment or things happening, and what sort of information are you getting? And I think, I always put the caveat that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm none of those things. But certainly I think that Spirit provides information that can kind of point the person in the right direction. So for example, somebody's having a lot of pain in their abdomen, and it's like, okay, well, I feel like it's your gallbladder. So then they can actually kind of push the doctor to be like, can we take a look at my gallbladder? And I do find these situations a little bit uncomfortable, because even though I've been, doing readings for a while, and I'm a fairly confident person, but I always kind of feel like, oh God, like what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like,
Absolutely. And it's interesting because
yeah.
you do so many and you're so right so many times, yet you still doubt. And that's why I call myself, one of the biggest skeptics in the whole industry, because to me, every time I get something, I go, oh, hang on a minute. What if I'm not right? What if I'm not? And most of the times I'm right. Nearly all the times I'm right. So, but you still do, you're giving a lot of information to someone and you feel responsibility for that. And with that comes, what if I am right? What if I am wrong?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But then I also think, and I don't want this to come across as a cop-out to disbelievers, but I was actually just talking to a client about it the other day that I did a reading for. And I said, look, this is what I feel like's going on, but please understand that I say, okay, your progesterone is low. And they go to the naturopath, and the naturopath does all of these tests and determines that, in fact, their thyroid is out, which typically I'll pick up on, but regardless, I'm just giving an example. But their thyroid is out. So then they're able to treat that. So the information that I gave them put them in the right direction.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's right. Yeah. You had the general concept of what was going on. You needed them to go to a naturopath, basically, to find the next step. Yeah.
And I personally haven't had anybody come back to me and say that I was incorrect. For the most part, I have people coming back to me saying that I was quite accurate, or even this woman who had her hormones tested. And the way that I tend to see hormones is it'll be like almost like a bar graph, and it'll be like, okay, this is low, this is up, this is whatever. And she came back and she said, you were bang on. Like exactly what you said for my levels was exactly what was happening. And I was like, wow, like, thank you so much. Like, I actually really love getting that validation.
Yeah. And it is great because it does, give you the confidence to keep going with everyone else. And I think we both are confident in what we're getting. So we do that, but that validation just goes, okay, yeah, like, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I do know what I'm talking about. And I do trust my guides, and I trust spirit, and I trust the information that I'm getting. But there's always this part of me that's like, well, I'm human. Like, I'm not always 100% accurate. To say that you are would be very egoic. Yeah. None of us are 100% accurate, especially since we can make conscious choices. Like, for example, I could have a person coming and I'm like, I'm seeing a pregnancy for you. And then they go yay or nay, like I want that or I don't. And they're like, oh yeah, I really don't care to get pregnant. So they go on birth control. Well, that's going to change sort of the trajectory of what, we're sort of seeing happening for them. So I definitely get a lot of that. A lot of people asking for medical information.
What about past loved ones? Like if I came into you and said, my father passed earlier this year and I'd like to be able to connect with him. Am I going to come in and expect, that I am going to connect with him, or that the information is coming from him, or can it come from someone else? Do you understand where I'm coming from with that?
I think that for the most part, what I see in readings is I see like a general theme, and it's not really who it's coming from, but it'll be a general theme of sort of the point that spirit's trying to get across in the reading. I, thus far, when somebody asks for somebody specific, I am able to bring that person in. They just show up and I'm able to do it. However, sometimes because you know this, Nettie, like you're getting descriptions and you're seeing the person and you're kind of getting this information, and it's excuse me. It's oh my gosh, I've got a terrible tickle.
I'm going to talk while you do that. Yeah, I agree with you. And for me, I get validations often from the person of things. And so even if it's they're wanting to come in to see their father or something like that, as you said, I will usually get the father, but I might also get other people that are coming through. And those other people I'll be able to say, it's two women together. They look like they were together in the past life. They have holding a child that looks like it has died young, and then they'll go, oh, that's my grandmother, my auntie who couldn't have children, she had a child that died. So it validates. And then once they've gone, yeah, that's it, and they know who the information, I find the information flows very fast and very quick. Yeah, it's like, okay, everyone knows, the spirits are comfortable that the person understands where the message is coming from. And then therefore, then they must get excited. It speeds up. Sometimes I've got to go, well, hang on a minute, I've just got to slow everyone down. It's coming in too fast. But I agree with you, usually the person that you want will come through, but you will find that other spirits will come through as well.
Or sometimes people will come and they'll be wanting to speak to somebody in particular, but they won't necessarily say that, and they'll just say, oh, okay, well, let's just sort of see who shows up. And interesting people show up. Like sometimes I'll have somebody come in and they'll be like, oh, I'm pretty sure I went to high school with that person. And then I'll go, okay, what's the message? And they'll be like, I'm just happy to be here. Same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the message. Or sometimes I'll get really profound things. Like once was this woman, and her loved one had passed, and her loved one came through and was like, I have a son, you need to go find him.
Yeah. Wow.
Like very profound things. Or another guy was like some serious financial advice from this loved one.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends, but I think for the most part, people come through with a very loving message.
Yeah.
And just a message of love and like, I'm okay, and that type of thing. And maybe our next podcast, we should actually talk about how spirit shows me and you the afterlife, because there's a lot of sort of describing that. And it's interesting with mediumship, because often the spirit will talk to me on a 3D level, but they'll also be talking to me on a higher, like 5D level. Yeah. So they're like, I felt this way, which this person is going to resonate with, but now that I'm on the other side, I see things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting because even as a medium, you see so much of the afterlife, but you have your own pieces. And it's quite interesting when someone comes along. I know, and we'll probably talk about this, I won't go into it this time, but you had something that came up within one of your readings when I was in Canada recently.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I sat on that for a couple of weeks because it made sense for some of the things that were happening to me, and I was like, oh, that's the missing piece, and I think that is a full podcast in itself. And so we're always learning more and gaining more information, and as mediums, if you're sharing that information, you're then helping each other put pieces. I also hear some stuff from people and I'm like, oh, that doesn't work for me in what I know. So how does that happen? How does their thing doesn't parallel with what I've got? But and
you mean
I
like
think,
as far as other mediums speaking of the afterlife?
Yeah.
What I think that is, and I don't want to say too much, like spoiler, but something super cool happened in a reading and I learned something new about the afterlife, and Nette was here and I came out and I'm like, oh my gosh, I learned something new, but I'm not going to share it yet. We're going to save it for the next podcast. But here's the thing. We all have different beliefs and ideas and different perspectives. And different perspectives is what actually creates dichotomies. It creates difference. It creates a lot of opportunity for growth within everybody. So we all will be also provided different perspectives of the afterlife, because I don't believe there is just one truth.
Yeah, I know. I love the saying, once you realize that reality is fluid and truth is fluid, it all makes sense. And, I love that, because it is true. There is more than one reality. There's more than one truth. And so it's your perspective. And when you think about the way that spirit presents things to each medium, so I've got, something that might signify like often things are put on a path and they're slightly to the right, and they're things that could happen, like a perceived or a possibility.
Ooh. Can you tell me about what a reading would be like for you? Like if spirit shows up, like what that looks like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll finish this and then I'll go into that. But you might have that coming up as something completely different in your imagery. And I think that's what we're getting with the afterlife. In some ways, we're getting the imagery that makes sense for us so that we can translate it in a way that our brain can comprehend it. And so for someone else, they might be at a different level of depth or a different thing. So everyone's getting slightly different. So it doesn't quite work into the same. But ultimately, I don't necessarily, I'm just going to describe a reading that came through when someone actually comes to see me, rather than the way that most of them, the spirit comes to me first. But if someone comes in to do a reading, usually I focus on a question or what direction they're trying to get, and I'll start to see an image. And I'm trying to not actually pull in ancestors usually at the start, but with me, I get to a certain level and it's like a door opening and they're all there to pop in. So most of the time, I think I've only had one reading where I haven't had ancestors or past friends or family come through. And so I'll start to see imagery, and I start with, maybe a shoe or whatever it is, and I'll start to talk to the person about that. And then from then the ancestors come in and I'll ask them, is it okay if I speak to your ancestor? Or I've got, a mother coming in, or a grandmother, or a friend, whatever it is.
But
Is
how
it
do you know if
okay?
it's a mother or a grandmother or a friend?
I can see them. So I can see them and they sit in slightly different spots. So on the right-hand side for me, which I think is opposite to a lot of mediums, is usually the mothers, and the left-hand side is the fathers. And then friends and sit further down on the left-hand side. Sorry, I'm dyslexic, so my left and right get a bit confused. And I'm also looking at them so they become backwards, if that makes sense. But I can see who they are. I don't always know exactly whether they're a mother or a grandmother, but they will start to give me information like clues to who they are, which I will then say, I've got a mother coming through. She's actually got a necklace around her neck that she's showing me. It's got a blue stone in it. Now I'm seeing a house with a little red door, and they'll say, oh, that is my grandmother who lived on a farm with a red door, and that she always wore that necklace, and actually that necklace is what she gave me. And I'll be like, okay. And then I might drop the imagery and I'll just see kind of a shape of a person, because she doesn't need to use the spirit doesn't need to use their energy or my energy to try and connect in a picture. Then we start to get words in, and then they start talking. And then I'll be trying to keep up, because I find I bring spirit in pretty fast, but then you need to then slow that down to actually say. So sometimes I'll be listening for a while and then I'll translate the bits that I need to say, or I'll just stop everything and say, hang on a minute, this is all too fast for me. And then I'll slow down into a pace that actually runs. And because I don't do it usually with a client there, it's fine to go fast. The speed that I work with spirit is very fast. Because spirit will come in and in about 2 minutes, I'll get like what would be an hour with a client. But when a client's there, I've got to be translating everything that's going as I go along. And so it's a lot slower, and it's changing the pace of what I'm used to working at, if that makes sense. And then you've also got them asking questions. So normally I don't have anyone asking questions. Spirit's coming in and it's spirit and I just having this quick, who is this for? What is this? Blah, blah, blah. And when someone then asks a question, I've got to stop and go, hang on a minute, spirit. Can we slow you down? Because we've got a thing. So I find it hard, and that's why I don't actually do a lot of readings for people, because it's not the style that I was come to do. I think you've said this in the past, I think I will be doing more of them in the future. I can see that my life will go into that a bit more, and I'm definitely getting asked as people know what I can do. I'm getting that, but I'm normally getting a spirit wanting to go into someone's life, which is quite hard, because I then have to cold call almost the person, and I find that I've got one at the moment, which I'm finding a huge dilemma. I haven't actually spoken to the spirit, and I've been getting a lot of headaches, sorry, to the person, and I'm getting a lot of headaches and a lot of issues like my hand and things that are all happening. And I know I have to actually speak to that person because his spirit is very adamant that this is the timing is quite right for that person to be spoken to. But it's a dilemma for me because it's someone who is, let's say, quite controversial and not someone that I would normally want to have dialogue with. So I was a bit pissed with spirit, to be honest. I was like, pick another medium. Like, this person loves conflict
you can
and
do
drama.
that.
I did that.
You can do that. The reality is that you can say no, and the message will get to them in some other way. It doesn't have to be you.
So I had this big discussion with my higher self, and they said that's fine. You can take that stance, but you know that you are there, and you know that this is due, and this is for your growth as much as for theirs. So sometimes the hard road is that's what you tell a client. The hard road is sometimes the better road, and for you, this is a hard thing to do, but you cannot do it now. And someone else can deliver that message. And then in a year's time, you can be in the same spot needing to deliver this hard message. So you can decide whether you want to do it. So,
whether you want to
I really got pushed back in my face and said, yeah, it's like, and it's true. I do know I've sat on it. I now know it's the right thing to do and the message needs to be delivered. I've just got to find the way that I can do it that has the least impact on my life. So it's interesting. It's so mediumship isn't all people say, oh yeah, they're so lucky, and I think it is that there is a real I wouldn't live without it. Like, I'm so pleased that I've got it.
I don't even know how I would.
Yeah, but
it's
comes
just so
with a
much
burden
a part
as well.
of me.
Yeah, that's right. I think it is it's your life. Right. And to imagine not being able to, when I think of people not being able to, even talk to my higher self, like a lot of my stuff, I have a really good relationship with my higher self. And so a lot of it is actually the information coming through my higher self, and then they're actually filtering who can and who can't talk. So all that filtering has been done, and that was our pact. And so when it comes down to me, for me to argue back and say I don't want to do this is a bit stupid, because I know it's in my best interest, or my higher self wouldn't have brought it in. So, but I still decided.
I like that you say that. I like that you say that, because that means that you're using boundaries with spirit. And if it comes to you, you sort of have that understanding. And I have those boundaries too. Like, I don't want to receive information like you do. But I also am a sitting medium, right? So people can actually come to me, and, I can just trust that, they'll find their way to me or to somebody that's going to give them that message.
Yeah. And if you're assuming that higher self has bought, like your guides and your spirits wouldn't have let that person, the timing work for that person to be there if it wasn't necessary. And,
it's true.
Yeah, we got to take the hard with the easy as well. So it's not always rosy. And I had another hard one a while ago, and it actually worked out really well, and the person's life has worked out a lot better from it too. So I keep reflecting back on that and saying, I thought that was super hard, whereas this one's even harder. And so it's quite interesting. But I have favorite spirits too. I don't know if you have favorite spirits. Your spirits come through and you're like, you go, that was cool. Like, I really enjoyed that. And sort of, you don't take on their energy, but you do feel their energy when they're in the room. So it's like meeting a new friend or meeting someone that, comes in and has good energy, right? And you go, oh, and they're
funny, or they're like quirky, or they're, it's very awesome.
Yeah.
So for me, when I do mediumship, usually I kind of get a little group of people off to my right. And I can just kind of see them there. And then my agreement with spirit is that they're going to kind of bring forward that more predominant energy first. And then I get, typically first, I'll get whether they're family or not. And I'll get a generation. So it would be like your mother, and then back a bit would be grandmother, and then back further, sort of stacked, would be like great grandmother. And I typically get like mother's side or father's side.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I was doing a reading the other day, and she said, well, would it be helpful if you saw a picture of my grandmother? I said, well, not really, because sometimes when it's a grandma, I get this like kind of image of this kind of heavier, plump, short, curly gray hair. And I'm like, and I, so I'm like, well, I know that this is your grandmother, but I can't actually say whether this is what your grandmother looks like or not, because that's also the image of what, my sort of symbol for grandmother is. And then I get kind of the same thing, the person, their personality, and I'll be like, okay, this person has this personality, or they act like this, or they, and they'll just kind of start showing me things. Or if this was somebody that was in their life in childhood, I'll typically get like a red wagon.
Yeah.
Or, so there's different
yeah.
sort of symbols that I get.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, like recently I did a reading and it was like, okay, well, I feel like this is a family friend, not actually blood related, because if it's blood related, I almost see a line connecting between them to the person that I'm reading. But if not, the person will be in like the sort of ancestral spot, like I explained, where they kind of stack up behind each other, and then they'll be close, but there won't sort of be that line that goes through. And it's like, this is somebody that you would have considered a grandfather or a fatherly figure, but is, not actually blood related. And I it's kind of hard for me to explain how I see that, but it's just, I can just not see a connection.
Yeah.
Like a blood related
I find
connection.
I get that in a knowing, like it looks like,
it's almost a knowing.
I was like, oh, it looks like, I'm going to say a mother, but it's not your mother. And it's sitting in your mother's
somebody
spot,
that was
like you
very
said.
close to you.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, it's not your mum, but it's your mum. They're saying they're your mum, but they're not your mum.
Right. And then so it'll be like, oh, that's my mom's best friend, or that's my my dad's best friend who we used to call Uncle Joe, or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So then we get a few descriptors, and then we sort of go into the message. And often the message is a message of encouragement, a message of you're doing well, a message of talking about breaking sort of ancestral patterns. It'll be, oh, you guys always like there was a lot of misogyny, say, in your family line, and this is where it's being broken with you, and grandfather's happy with that, and please, because in their generation that was required, now it isn't, that type of thing. Or it'll be, like I said, I got some crazy financial advice for this guy once, or
were you thinking
it'll
of taking it up yourself? Oh, okay.
Well, they were actually in a different country, so it didn't fully apply, but it's interesting.
We've still got a couple of minutes left, and just before we run up, if someone is interested in contacting you, what is the best way of getting hold of you, and how long do they have to wait, sort of thing? Is it?
Well, right now, I just do readings in the morning because, I work full time as a police officer. I'm busy. I have a family. And the best way is through avalonspirit.com, through the journey guides. And you will see me there. I actually have to change my picture because it's of me with blonde hair as opposed to brown. But that's the best way to find me. And one of these days I'm going to get my own website set up and take my own bookings. But I love working with Jeanette. She's just lovely. I've gotten so many referrals and clients from her, people listening to the podcast that follow her. And
look, we met through Jeanette's circle, so
I know,
realistically,
and
she's amazing.
Just lovely. She's just lovely, and she's, one thing that I really like about her is that she's all about sharing the wealth and sharing, everybody succeeding. She's not one of those people that doesn't want you to do well or to outshine, or you can't outshine her because she's just unique unto herself. But
she's beautiful
person. She's lovely. So that's basically sort of, what readings look like. And I think you mentioned it right at the beginning about like how people can prepare. And I'm going to say this very honestly, and without the caveats of, you do you, da, da, da. If you're going to come to a reading, be open to it.
Yeah.
And be open to exchanging the energy, because sometimes people will come and they're a little bit apprehensive and they're not giving a lot. And it's not that I need you to give me information in order for me to get the information that I get. But when you're not conversing, you're not exchanging energy. It's not going back and forth. It becomes, for me, almost like I'm energetically reaching, as opposed to this nice energetic flow back and forth.
I totally agree with you. And I think if the person comes in with their energy level at a certain thing, because for me, the way I read is that my levels get to a certain height, and the higher it goes and the more open it becomes. So if you come in with positive energy and already your energy level's at a certain height, it actually helps the reader get to there
100%.
quicker. And then the flow's better and you'll get more for the time that you've got. You're limited to the time with the medium. So use it. And don't go to them and then close yourself off. Don't have to give information, just be open to it.
Exactly. And just as an example, I get these 5 cards that I lay out. I'll get this general sort of, okay, so whatever situation this is that you're dealing with, this is what it's going to look like. This is where it's going to go. This is the time frame. But I don't have a clue what I'm actually talking about.
Yeah.
I just get this sort of generalized idea. But then when they tell me what they're like, yeah, that's bang on. That's what's happening right now. Then I can dive in a little bit more, and spirit gives me more information. Like, oh, I'm trying to open a business. And it's like, you know what? There's this person within the business that you're trying to open it up with that's going to be problematic. Yeah. And it just...
And then spirit knows that you've both got to there, right? So then they give you more, because if they don't know that you've got to that point, then they're still trying to do that same thing in 20 different ways. And then the person goes, yeah, I understand where they're talking about. And then you go, okay, next. And then I understand that, next. And it's just like a flow on. Like, assume you're speaking to someone with a translator in the middle, and you're just verifying that you understand where they're at. And then they'll give you the next part of the thing. You're not giving the answer. Yeah.
Yes, because sometimes I'll be getting information, say medical information, and I'll actually have to be speaking and talking in order for the next piece of information to come.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't almost stack up. So I almost have to get that flow going. So if that flow is going and the person's a bit energetically blocked, not really sure, and it's okay when people aren't sure. I'm not saying that that's a horribly bad thing. I'm just saying it just doesn't flow as nicely. You need to have that energetic flow back and forth.
Absolutely. Well, that's our time up for the day. And
wow.
Yeah, I know, it went so fast. But we will put the Avalon Spirit link in, which we'll do every week anyway, so that if you want to get a reading with Tania, you can, or if you just want to chat to us, ask us questions, put it in there. We'll be making sure we read them, and we'll respond as quickly as we can.
We are, sorry, honey, we are planning on having a Q&A coming up. So please put your questions in the comments. If you don't want to put them in the comments, you can email us at... What's our email?
Or even message us on Facebook, or
perfect, or on whatever
or
platform.
Email us at taniaandnette@gmail.com. So either way, we'll get them. So, but yeah, if you're on Facebook, send us a message and we'll do that. But if you're not on Facebook, definitely taniaandnette@gmail.com. And we will try and answer all your questions. But we love Q&As because it brings up what you actually are looking for. So thank you today for listening, everyone. And thank you. So lovely to speak to you again, Tania. I love
you as well.
Thank
you.